Today we start a message series just looking at some spiritual gifts through the lens of the book of Ephesians and looking through Jesus' life. So it might be a little heady today, it might be a little intellectual today, and it's intentionally so. So you have two options. You could take notes or fall asleep. So probably like your two options today. I'm hoping for taking notes along the way. Before we get there, here's what I would say on the front side, that everything we're talking about this morning is standing on this gospel truth within our lives. Is that we believe at the depth of who we are, that in God's great love for us, you and I were not abandoned by Him. And what I mean by that is you and I were not left to deal with our own junk. Like, how many of you are like me, where I look in the mirror and there's a lot of junk that's there? There's a lot of things that needs fixed. There's a lot of things that if it was up to what I brought to the table and going to be with God forever, I'd never earn my place there. How many of you, there are things in your life that you've caused some damage and some pain to you and those around you, that if you actually had to live into those consequences, you and I wouldn't be worthy to step onto the ground of the one who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. But yet, it's God's great love for you and I that He came into this world through Jesus. And Jesus died my death. Jesus, what we believe, Jesus died your death so that when you die, when I die, we actually get to live His life. And Jesus on the cross defeated sin. Sin is where you and I miss the mark. So a lot of us, we feel bound to our sin because we look into the mirror and we know all the ways that we miss the mark in our lives, and we know that we can't fix it. And so we feel kind of bound to it and not worthy of stepping in or coming to a place like church sometimes, etc. What we want to say is this, is that in Jesus, God squared all of it away. He squared all of it away and said, I don't look and see the filth and the mess of your life. I see my Son who stood in your place, who ministers on your behalf at my throne forever and ever. And because of Him, I have torn away the barrier of death that separates me from you, and now I've welcomed you into my life and my family forever and ever. And now, what I ask of you is this: do your best to represent me until you come live with me forever. So everything today, in the midst of all the kind of stuff we get into, it all stands on that truth and that promise this morning. Okay? Does it make sense? All right. My dad used to say this to me when I was a kid sometimes. He would say, boy, you need to fix your face. You ever said that to your kids before? I mean, maybe only boomers did that. Maybe, millennials and Gen X is like, that's a little bit mean. We don't say, I say that to my kids. I'm like, last night we're hanging out, and my little girl, Lexi, she's 7, and she's sitting over in the corner like this. No, she's 9. That's right. She's going to be 10. All right, she's getting old. She's getting old. Whatever, she's a kid. She's a kid, all right? She's a kid. So she's like this. And I'm like, you better fix your face. And she goes, like how sometimes we have no idea how we're coming across to the people that are around us, do we? I know it's like a little fun story, but like she had no idea, like fix her face. Like so often we're not aware of how we come across to the people around us. I would say this, part of being a follower of Jesus is becoming more and more human. And by human, what I mean by this is becoming more God-aware and self-aware within our lives. That part of growing into maturity is becoming self-aware of who I am, which means this, I'm becoming more and more aware of my blind spots. I'm becoming more and more aware of the places in my life that I need to fix my face. And I'm becoming more gracious and patient with the people around me in their blind spots. Okay, so here's what we'll often do. In our immaturity, we'll think everybody else needs to fix their face, and then we'll be more patient and give more grace to ourselves and not them. What I actually want to say is the work of Jesus in our life, the work of allowing His grace to renew our minds to become the people that He's called us to be. Like literally, I would say He dies upon the cross, rises from the dead to defeat death, but in defeating death, it's to defeat all aspects of it, which means that I now aren't just looking at myself as like, okay, you should all be like me, and you as you need to fix what's going on with you, but now I look and flip it where it's, God, can you help me to see the blind spots in my life, but also will you help give me the grace and the patience for the blind spots that I may see in others. Life is this self-awareness, God-awareness journey. And we would just say this, the self-awareness journey, it has to be grounded in something, or you can make it what you want. It can just be your opinion. And I would say, for us, that journey is grounded in Jesus. That self-awareness apart from Jesus is not self-awareness. Okay? It's grounded in Jesus. Jesus is 100% human, 100% God. In Jesus, we get to see what humanity looked like pre-fall. All right? So remember the story. God, Genesis 1 and 2, creates the world, and after every day He creates, He says it is good. He creates us and says it's very good. And we're created to be fruitful. We're created to be productive. We're created to rule and reign on His behalf. That's prior to, then God says, I'm not going to make you love me back. You have to choose. Like that's part of what this free love is. And we choose our own way instead of God's way. That brings sin into the world. In Jesus, we get a glimpse of what God intended humanity to look like. So if I want to know what it means to be human, I just read the story of the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You don't have to go to the self-help, section and read there. You just read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you just look at Jesus. That's what it looks like to be truly human, the way that God intended it. And so we want our self-awareness to be grounded in that. So Jesus is the most productive human on the face of the planet. He's perfect in all of the different personality types, okay? All the different personality types. He's the example to follow for us. So in Jesus, we see the best version of ourselves. So for the next 5 weeks, we're going to look at a couple of different spiritual gifts. I would call them graces that we all share. You probably have one or two of those that God's given you, that you're wired in a particular way. It's what you bring to the table. I would just say in Jesus, you and I see the best version of ourselves, what we're striving for. In Jesus, we see the best version of others and learn to appreciate their gifts, okay? Learn to appreciate their gifts. Now, the church is this. The church is the people of God who are continuing the mission of Jesus. And Paul calls the church what? the body of Christ. Paul calls the church, Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament. He calls the church the body of Christ. And he says the church is made up of many members. And all of them have a different function. Because if we were all an ear, how would we see? If we were all an eye, how would we speak? If we were all a hand, how would, he says we're a body, many parts, made up of many members, but we're not all the same, but we come together to make up the body of Christ. So Jesus has a huge shadow, okay? Has a huge shadow. And none of us individually can fill that whole shadow, all right? So it doesn't matter how close I become to the person God wants me to be, me in and above myself cannot fill out the whole shadow of Jesus. Which also means it's hard for me to be just an individual, isolated, and a Christian. There's no concept of that in the New Testament. There's only a concept of I'm an individual who's a part of a family. Because all of us come together in our differences, and hopefully, ideally, as we're working to grow into who God's called us to be, we more and more fill out the shadow of Jesus in such a way that we can continue His mission and ministry and purpose here within the world that we live into. So as Paul writes to the Ephesians, he's writing to a greater church. Ephesus is the epicenter of the church in Asia Minor. And as Paul writes them in Ephesians 4, he says the church has been gifted with the graces of apostle and prophet and evangelist and shepherd and teacher. Now, there are so many different spiritual gifts, assessments, pointing to all throughout the New Testament. So we're not saying Ephesians 4 is the most important place to go for spiritual gifts. We're just saying it's the lens we're using the next 5 weeks. So we're going to look at and unpack what does it mean for those of us who are given the grace of apostle? What's it mean for those of us who've been given the grace of prophet, who've been given the grace of evangelist, who've been given the grace of shepherd, who've been given the grace of teacher? And every single person in this room has been given a grace. Every single one of you has been given a grace. Some of you may be aware of that grace. Some of you may not be. It also means there are other people in the room who have different graces than you. And sometimes in our own immaturity, other people's graces get on our nerves because they're different graces. And we kind of like everybody just to be an ear like us. That'd be a whole lot better. But the reality of it is the more we grow in this, we want to do 2 things in the next 5 weeks. One, we want you to celebrate who you are, okay, who you are, and to be aware of it, but also to be able to celebrate who someone else is. And then thirdly, to be aware of how we all work and fit together, okay? So you have a grace upon you, a gifting from God that's given to you to help fill out the shadow of Jesus within the world, okay? Like, that's just so important for you to realize. Like, some of you may be sitting there and say, I bring nothing to the table. Like, if that's a thought in your mind today, that is a lie from Satan himself. So if you have a thought like I don't bring anything to the table, that's what Satan's voice sounds like. Like, it's important to know that too. Like, I don't have nothing to give. No, that's a lie. Like, every one of us, you bring something to the table that helps to fill out the shadow of Jesus. And your job and my job is to be aware of that grace. Like, I would say that is an absolutely fundamental responsibility that you become aware of the grace, the gifting that God's given you, that you learn about it. You know what it is, that brings to the table. You become aware of it, you know its strengths, you know its weaknesses, and then you know how it fits into the body. Now, at the same time, just like quick look at the person beside you. Just kind of quick look. All right, there we go. Like person behind you, go ahead, like person behind you. Yeah, behind you. Person in front of you, like person other section over there. Like I know this is like these are the over here pole people over here, These are the kind of rowdy kind of folks. We don't associate with them. They don't associate with here's the deal. Every one of them, they have a grace upon them too. And the way that God feels about you, God feels about them. And the way that you feel about hearing about your grace, and you're like, man, that's free. That's awesome. I love that. Like, can we talk more about my grace? Like, they enjoy hearing about their grace in their life. All right? And so for the next several weeks, we just want to press into that along the way. Here are just some websites. These are all free tests except for the bottom one. Like homework would be this week, take them all, okay? And just see where they come out. So you've got fivefoldmission.org, fivefoldsurvey.com, fivefoldministry.com, and then APES, which is the acronym for Apostle, Prophet, Evangelist, Shepherd, Teacher. Alan Hirsch has done the most significant work in all of that. He is the expert voice in this conversation. That test is $10 if you want to take it. I don't think it's necessary, but for some of you who feel like I want to, go for it, all right? But I'd say take all three, and just see how those come up. I would say your top two are, I would say, the graces that God has given you. So like for me, it's apostle, prophet. Somebody else, it might be shepherd, teacher, it might be evangelist, prophet, like just to see in that way. Now, all that to say, we're going to spend the next several weeks looking at Jesus' life, and we're going to see him living into all of these graces, okay? So here's the hope of the next 5 weeks. The hope of this series is that you become more self-aware and others aware, and you see where you fit and what you bring to the table. Like that's the hope. That'd be the win. So if we get done with 5 weeks and you'd say, you know what, I'm a little bit more aware of who I am, I'm more aware of the people around me, and I see where my gifts and graces fit and what I bring to the table, like that would be the goal and the win over the next 5 weeks. So this morning we're going to start with the acronym. We're going to start with apostle. All right, so some of you in the room, you're an apostle. Here's what an apostle does. Apostles are visionaries that help us to see a way forward. So an apostle always asks the question of what could be. So I'm getting ready to go on vacation in a couple of weeks, and I'm already thinking in my mind what could be. I'm like, oh, we might be able to do this, or we could do that, or we might actually do this, or maybe we'll go here, or I'm already thinking of the countless possibilities of what's going to make this vacation the best one we've ever had, right? Like in my mind, it just kind of oozes out of me. Apostles embrace and enjoy change. So if you're here this morning and you're like, the more change, the better, chances are you may be an apostle, all right? If you're like, I do not like change, we're going to get to you in a few weeks, all right? Apostles are able to see what's missing, and they can imagine a new thing. So apostles walk into a room and they already start to think about what could make this better. What's missing in here? What new thing could we step into? And even if we fail, it's okay, because it would lead to another new thing that we could do. All right? That's what apostles do. Now, here's some ways that sin becomes an obstacle to those gifted with this apostle gifting, or ways in which apostles are unhealthy. Okay? Because there's a shadow side to all of these. So when we have an environment that says, I want to play it safe, I want to stay where I'm comfortable, I just want to worry about today and not think about tomorrow, that becomes an obstacle to the apostle. So if you're married to an apostle and you don't like change and you like to be comfortable and you want to worry about today and not think about tomorrow, that's an obstacle to their wiring of who God's created them to be. And we're going to help you figure out how you work together in the midst of that, okay? But you can see how that works sometimes. So Amanda and I, we've had to do a lot of work with this, a ton of work with this, because I'm always thinking about us, and she's always thinking about what's behind us. Like, here's a little example. So we were getting ready to go to Disney World a number of years ago, okay? And we're talking about Disney World. I'm like, honey, it's going to be fantastic. Like, we can do this and we can do that. We can go to this ride on this day, and maybe we can get reservations at this restaurant on this day, and all this. And all of a sudden she goes, you know, last year it rained at the beach. I'm like, honey, like, we're talking about Disney World right now. We're not talking about what happened at the beach last year. Like, this is Mickey Mouse. This is not rain. And all she was asking was this: do you have a plan if it rains while we're there? What I'm saying is this, is we're all wired in different ways. It's going to be important for us to know how we complement each other. The apostle is always looking forward, always imagining that new thing. So when we play it safe, we want to stay where it's comfortable. We're consumed with today. We don't look to tomorrow. That's an environment that will stifle the apostle. Without the apostle, within our church, within our gospel family, within our workplace, we can become stuck, we can be internally focused, and in that internal focus, it can lead to grumbling and complaining against each other. So the apostle is the one that helps us not to stare at our own navels, but to be focused on where we're headed into the future. Now, an immature apostle will run over folks to get their way. An immature apostle will run over people and will give off the feeling that it's my way or the highway. I know you guys have never felt that from me before. So as I look back over the course of the journey of this whole self-awareness, God-awareness deal, I mean, I can look back and see, like, the early days of Crossroads. God absolutely used an apostolic gifting in me to help give birth to this church. But as I also look back into those early days, there was so much of an immature apostle in me that I ran over just a lot of people. And there were often times, implicitly and explicitly, gave off the vibe and probably said, it's my way or the highway, and hurt folks along the way. Now, in the midst of a family who has grace and is willing to have conversations, you guys have loved me enough to help me grow through that. And I still have a tendency to do that. Like, it kind of comes kind of natural for me. And I need to work on that, but I'm so much better than what I used to be, okay? But an unhealthy apostle will bulldoze over people to get to their vision. Because for an apostle, the vision is more important than the people. And if people die along the way, people get killed in war. It happens, at least we got the hill. I mean, that's how an apostle thinks. An immature one will actually live into that. A healthy one will realize that if I get to the top of the hill and nobody's with me, I might as well not have gotten the hill at all. I need to learn how to bring people along. Okay? That's how sin kind of get in the way of stifling out an apostolic gift or what an unhealthy apostle will be. So let's take a look at Jesus real quick. Mark chapter 1 this morning, verses 35 through 39 this morning. Mark chapter 1, verses 35 through 39. If you've read through the Gospels at all, Mark's kind of like the comic book version. You know, a comic book's really short, just gives you glimpses here and there. It's a very short gospel. It's just one little thing after another. And so Mark moves pretty quickly through his gospel. Here, this is where we see Jesus. There's tons of places in the Gospels where we see his apostolic gifting. This is just one of those early on that I think really is a great little picture of that. So verse 35 here this morning. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said, "Everyone is looking for you." So at this point, Jesus has attracted a huge crowd, okay? Like there are already like a ton of folks that are following him. Like honestly, you would think, let's get some land, let's build a building, let's have a church. Like this is going great. This is fantastic. Everybody's looking for him. And he said to them, "Let us go on to the next town, that I may preach there also." So we see Jesus saying, he's looking through this lens of it's more important, bigger picture, where I'm headed, where we're headed, than what the current breakthrough is today. That where we're going tomorrow is more important than the breakthrough that we're receiving today. "For that is why I came out." And he went throughout all of Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. Jesus has every reason to stay present. He has every reason to enjoy the breakthrough of yesterday, the breakthrough of today. Yet, he has his eye on the bigger picture. The apostle always has their eye on the bigger picture. So if you're here this morning and you think, you know what, I always think through, like, what's in front? What's the bigger picture? How does this play a part in the bigger scheme that's going on? You probably have that apostolic gifting. Jesus focuses on what could be. He's willing to leave the comfort of today for the promise of tomorrow. The reason the church, the reason that we need apostles among us is without them, we'll be satisfied with the comfort of today and we'll miss out on the promise that God has for us tomorrow. God has a preferred future for your life and my life. The apostle is the one that asked the question, are the people of God walking into their destiny? The way in which the church steps into their destiny is they have apostles that help to lead them in that direction. When the church can empower apostles what happens at that point is this becomes a training ground to release apostles into the world. All right, so let's think about the world. Entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs are going to have this apostolic gifting. How great would it be that if those with that gifting weren't just starting new things because they like to do it, but what if they had a frame of reference of they were grounded in Jesus, that they were starting from that perspective? We just want to say this, that as a church, when we create space for apostles to step into their gifting here, it empowers them to do it out into the world. Okay, if you are an apostle, you bring significant value to the family. We need you to help us see the bigger picture, okay? So how many of you, just your blank, would say like, sounds like I could be an apostle? Just real quick. A few. All right. Normally it's not many. Okay? Just with you, you just need to know this. The church, us, the gospel family, we need you to help us see the bigger picture. Without you, we don't see the bigger picture. It's what you bring to the table. We need you to help us dream of tomorrow. Now, in the same breath, we also need this from you. We need you to believe, even if it doesn't seem logical, that people are as important as the vision. Okay? That people and relationships are as important as getting to tomorrow. And we need you, when I say you, I'm also talking to me as an apostle. The church needs us not to bulldoze over them to get our way, but to be patient for people to come along beside us. All right, if you're not an apostle, raise your hand. It's like everybody else. Come on. All right, most of you, okay? If you're not an apostle, this is the way that you can make grace for apostles and to value them, all right? And to value them. One is to identify who they are. Figure out who they are within your gospel family, within your church, even within your workplace. Like in your workplace, who are the people that are always thinking future, right? Identify who they are and make space for them to dream. Let them dream and realize every dream doesn't have to become a plan. Okay? And every dream doesn't mean it's an action plan that's happening right now. Like, as an apostle, if you're not one, they got dreams all day long. All day long. They've got future ideas all day long. All day long, okay? They just need space, though, right? Because if an apostle tells you, like, hey, I've been thinking about this, it doesn't mean they actually are doing it yet. It just means they're thinking about it, all right? They need space. They need space to dream with no strings attached. Now, same time, they also need boundaries, okay? They also need boundaries in making sure they communicate to you, is this an actual dream that you want to fight for, or are you just dreaming, okay? Or are you just dreaming? And then in seasons where either the church, the gospel family, your workplace, your family, where you're in a season that you're doing something new or there's change happening, it's a pioneering season. If you have an apostle in your midst, let them lead. Let them lead. So God says to Abraham, I want you to go out into the land. And once you start going, I'll tell you where you're headed. What I mean by that is this, is for an apostle, the dream that gets them started and where they think they're going doesn't always end up the destination where they end up. And that's okay. Lots of us sometimes, though, we'll say this to an apostle, well, tell me where we're going first and then I'll go. They don't work that way. They chart the territory as they go. So in a pioneering season, give them space to do that along the way. All right? Okay. Again, this is a 5-week kind of deal, so we are going to pause right there today. You've heard a lot this morning. We've heard some about self-awareness. I've talked a lot about that, God awareness, the awareness of others that are around us. We've mentioned this idea of the different graces that we all have, and one's not better than the other, but we all have a different grace upon us. We've looked at Jesus briefly as the apostle and that gifting of that apostolic gifting and that weakness. It's a lot of information. Here's what I'd like to do is we kind of just pause and we'll pick back up next week. I'd like you to think about just right now in your life, what's grabbing your attention the most this morning? Like, what thought is it? Is it something about the apostle? Is it about the self-awareness piece? Is it about, the weakness of some of the obstacles? Like, what's grabbing your attention the most today? And then I just want to invite you in a couple of moments. I'm just going to invite you to have a conversation, to have a moment with Jesus over the next couple of songs, and really just to ask this question, like, what is it that you're saying to me today, and what do you want me to do about it? Okay? You might be thinking about some of the apostles in your life. It might be the one that you live with, and how you're getting in their way or they're getting in your way. I'm not sure what. It might be who are those around me. It might be somebody that you work with. It might be this idea that, gosh, I need to be more self-aware in my life. It doesn't matter to us as much as this is the time and the space where we can just begin to ask this question. I want to kind of start this journey with us this morning just by praying with you and over you. The band's going to come up. They're going to lead us in a couple of songs. And if you want to have your hands open or closed, that's fine. You keep your eyes shut. You can keep them open. Doesn't matter to me this morning. And God, I want to come to you here in this space today. And I just want to thank you, Lord, that you have designed us in such a way that you've given us all a grace, a gifting. And Lord, I want to thank you for how we're all wired differently. I want to thank you, Lord, for how you bring us together to form your body. And so, God, I just ask this morning that whatever it is that you're dealing in the hearts and minds of those that are here, Lord, there may be something going on in someone's life today that has nothing to do with this teaching this morning. There may be some folks here today where this teaching is just exactly what they needed today. Lord, what we say in those two different extremes this morning and all the places in between, God, we just ask you now over these next several moments for you to be the loudest voice in the room, for you to yes, Lord, for you to speak to each person that's here today. May you help them to hear from you clearly, Lord. God, if there are men in the room today that are being lousy husbands and lousy dads, then I just pray, God, you deal with that today. Lord, if there are ladies in the room that have unfair expectations about life, whether it's about what they look or what they have, I pray that you deal with that, Lord. Lord, if there are people in the room today, Lord, that have extreme loss that they're carrying this morning, God, I pray that you would comfort them. Lord, if there are those here today who are questioning you, who have never been able to say they felt you or experienced you or have played the motions of church in their life and feel stuck, God, I just pray you would just pour out grace on them right now. Even in these moments, right in this moment, you would remind them, even for the first time, how real you are. God, if there are people here this morning that feel captive by depression or disease, I pray, God, for you and unleashing for a healing upon them, for them to grab hold of your comfort. And then everything in between, Lord, we just release these next several moments to you.